So this is my dad, who's a huge Doctor Strange fan.
Yes, I am.
Probably the biggest Doctor Strange fan I know. When and what got you into Doctor Strange?
The summer after my senior year of high school in 1971, a friend of mine from high school lent me several trash bags full of Marvel comics to read. I remember being blown away by Fantastic Four, and we're talking the early stuff. I remember loving The Coming of Galactus 48 through 50. And then one of the things he had was some Strange Tales, which is the early Doctor Strange. And I liked that, and I got into that. But when I was in college was probably when I really got into Doctor Strange. Because Doctor Strange is just cosmic and out there and sort of psychedelic. I was really into it.
So you've seen the movie twice.
I've seen the movie twice. 3D both times. Recommended 3D. Spoiler alert, we're going to talk about the movie, right?
Okay.
Right? Is that what we're doing?
No, that's good. Well, first, what did you think of the movie?
I love the movie. There are a lot of differences between what happens in the comic books and what happens in the movie. The movie is very true to the spirit of the comic books, which is all you ask. There's only one thing I really don't like in the movie.
What's that?
These, what do they call them? Slip rings?
Yeah.
That supposedly, they put on their fingers and to cast spells. That's not in the comics. I don't like it. It's like Harry Potter, they had to have the wands. There's that one scene in the fight with Kaecilius where Kaecilius is like, I got you because you don't have your slip ring on. I mean, please. Why are we doing slip rings? In the one training thing, you've got that whole tray. Everybody's got these various slip rings. Like, there's nothing special about a slip ring. There's not like, Harry Potter, you've got the wand that chooses the magician or anything like that. I really don't like the slip rings.
Was there ever slip rings in the comic, or is that solely for this movie?
It's slowly movie. It's not in the comics at all. No.
Okay.
Now, there are magic items. The Eye of Agamotto is from the comics. The Book of Cagliostro is from the comics. A Wand of Watum that Wong uses. That's in the comics. But having everybody need to have a slip ring, I really didn't like that.
But other than that,
it's really good. And there's lots of differences. Like, for example, one of the things I really like is the fact that they've obviously set up Mordo to be the villain in the second movie. In the comics, Mordo's the villain the first time he appears. He has no backstory. He's the archenemy because he's evil. He's evil because he's the archenemy. There's no backstory. There's no resonance. It was common back in the Silver Age of Marvel Comics. And Mordo, early on, is there all the time. The first 30 Doctor Strange comics, Mordo is the bad guy in 18 of them. I counted. And first Doctor Strange appearances in 110 of Strange Tales. Strange Tales was a split book. Back then, when Doctor Strange first started, half of the book was the solo adventures of Johnny Storm, the Human Torch from Fantastic Four. And then the second half of the book was Doctor Strange. It was obvious they were just sort of testing it out to see if it would work. Because Doctor Strange is in 110 and 111. He's not in 112 or 113. And then in 114 they bring him back. And then in 115 they finally do a origin, which is roughly the origin from the movie. I mean, there's some differences. And Mordo is bad guy right away. He appears right away at that time, the only apprentice for the Ancient One. Doctor Strange comes trying to get his hands cured, and then there's a sudden snowstorm that blocks him into the Himalayas, which the implication is that the Ancient One did that to keep him there. And then Doctor Strange sees Mordo trying to attack the Ancient One, and then Doctor Strange wants to tell the Ancient One. Mordo casts a spell on Doctor Strange so he can't tell him. That's what makes Doctor Strange say, I want to stay here and learn how to be a mystic. That was his way to try to get around the spell that he couldn't tell the Ancient One about. And then once he says, I want to stay and study, then the Ancient One says, yeah, well, I knew Mordo was a bad guy all along, and he lifted the spell that Mordo had cast on him. So I like it a lot better in the movie because they've set up a backstory for Mordo to be the bad guy in the second movie. And I like that a lot. I think it's going to resonate more.
The special effects and the imagery in it is a lot like Ditko.
Very much so. Very early on, there's a 2-issue story where Doctor Strange goes into the Dark Dimension and has a confrontation with Dormammu. And Clea does something to sort of help Doctor Strange. Clea's not in the movies at all. Clea eventually becomes Doctor Strange's girlfriend / wife / disciple. And then the Mindless Ones, which Dormammu has this barrier that keeps these magic figures of destruction to protect his people in the Dark Dimension.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
But they're not in the movie.
They're not in the movie.
Okay.
They look like stone golems with one eye that blasts like a cyclops. All they do is destroy. They're mindless, and they're very, very powerful. Dormammu has a barrier up to protect the denizens of the Dark Dimension. I have to use alliteration for this here, okay? Back then in the Silver Age, the big bad guys, although they were bad, they nonetheless had a certain view of themselves as honorable, like Doctor Doom.
Yeah.
Okay. During a battle between Doctor Strange and Dormammu, mindless ones get past the barrier. Since Dormammu's been fighting with Doctor Strange and is distracted, he's having trouble putting him back behind the barrier, and Doctor Strange helps.
Oh, okay.
That puts him behind, and then Dormammu, out of his honor, will not attack Doctor Strange again, because Dormammu's a lot more powerful than Doctor Strange. That's true in the movie as well. So Dormammu says, well, I can't kill you now because I owe you, and I promise I'll never attack you while you're on Earth.
Okay? Oh, so like the bargain he makes in the movie.
And then there's a second.
It's similar that he makes a bargain.
Absolutely.
But it's not. Yeah, but that's interesting.
So then Dormammu is not happy with this bargain, but he's not going to just break his bargain because he's a man of honor, a creature, of honor. Yeah. So he's going to attack Doctor Strange by funneling power to Mordo so Mordo can attack. This storyline, to me, is the peak of the Ditko Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange is fleeing throughout Earth, and Dormammu sends these wraiths that are going all through the Earth chasing him, trying to find him. And then eventually he goes to the Dark Dimension, and then Dormammu says, okay, well, I could just blast you, but to make it fair, we're going to fight with these pincers of power. It's sort of silly. And then denizens from all the leaders from all the various other dimensions come to watch the fight. To make a long story short, Doctor Strange beats him with these pincers and defeats Dormammu, and so the result is then Dormammu promises not only will he not attack Strange on Earth, he won't attack Earth. And then he's so angry about this defeat. During this run, it's the introduction of Eternity, who's a main cosmic character in the Marvel Universe. And Doctor Strange at one point I thought this was really interesting, goes to Eternity, the Ancient One who's failing and of ill health, says to Doctor Strange, you have to go find Eternity. He goes, finds Eternity to get Eternity to help him against Dormammu, and Eternity listens to him and basically says no. I mean, really?
Wow.
Yeah, with the implication was, you really don't need me. At the end, Dormammu thinks that Eternity has helped Doctor Strange, so Dormammu goes and attacks Eternity. Bad move.
Yeah.
And he gets sort of blasted into nothingness, and is missing in action for a while, shall we say. And that's when Umar, the Unmentionable, who's Dormammu's sister, then takes over the Dark Dimension and blasts Clea into another universe. It's great stuff. The psychedelic imagery of Ditko during going into the dimensions with the streaming things and stuff, you get that in the pictures of the Dark Dimension in the movie. It's very much based on Ditko's imagery in those comics. That line of stories I was talking about with Doctor Strange and Dormammu and Mordo starts in Strange Tales 130 and continues to Strange Tales 141, if I recall correctly.
So I think the thing with Doctor Strange, when I've talked to people about it, is they don't know much about the character or what story to get into. A good Doctor Strange story to fall in love with the character of Doctor Strange.
The story I just described from 130 to 141 of Strange Tales.
Oh, that's
a good one.
Yeah.
Another one that's really
is there a trade paperback of that? Or?
Probably.
Oh, okay.
Another one that I really love is the early Marvel premiere. A lot of times Doctor Strange isn't titled Doctor Strange in the comics. You've got Strange Tales, sometimes it is Doctor Strange. Marvel premiere featuring Doctor Strange. And the artist is Frank Brunner, Brunner. And there's a fairly extended storyline where it starts off with Doctor Strange sort of fighting some monsters, and it sort of seems that there may be some controlling entity that's sort of sending him this way, and Doctor Strange chases it down, and the villain is Shuma Gorath. It's all very, if anyone's into H.P. Lovecraft, it's very Lovecraftian. In order to destroy Shuma Gorath, they have to destroy the Ancient One. They have to kill the Ancient One. It's really cool. It's really heavy. Cool. And I'm not sure who did it first, whether it was Doctor Strange or Star Wars. But, once he's dead, the Ancient One sort of becomes one with the universe, sort of like Obi-Wan Kenobi. Okay, so he will occasionally appear. It's very important in the development of Doctor Strange, and they got it out of the way in the first movie. For him to really come into his own, he was trained by the Ancient One, but the Ancient One has to die so that Doctor Strange can become the Sorcerer Supreme, the top guy. And in the early Strange Tales, when you've got the Ancient One, in some ways it reminds me of Peter Parker and Aunt May, because he's worried about the Ancient One. The Ancient One's old, he's getting frail, but at the same time, what's different is the Ancient One early on is clearly more powerful than Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange is in this battle and he seeks help from the Ancient One, and the Ancient One gives him some help, or Doctor Strange has to protect the Ancient One, which is in that thing with Dormammu and Mordo in Strange Tales. So there's that. But he has to come into his own. Ancient One has to die. And that takes place in, if I recall correctly, the death of the Ancient One is in Marvel Premiere 10.
Okay.
I'm not absolutely certain. Now, shortly thereafter, still in Marvel Premiere, you've got the storyline with the Book of Cagliostro, which is referenced in the movie, which is a time thing, and where there's a wizard called Cisneg who goes back in time to gather more and more mystical power. And when he goes all the way back to the beginning of time, in typical comic books, I want to control everything, he realizes that the way it was is the way it should be, and he starts everything all over again and runs it fast forward, so to speak, so it gets back to where it was. And since he's turned it around, you turn his name around and it's Genesis. Okay. But then you get into the whole 1974 series that's titled Doctor Strange. The whole run is really very, very good. And one of the things I like about it is this is when Clea has come into her own as a major figure and character in her own right. In the early Strange Tales, she tries to help. She's the maiden in distress sort of thing. But in the Doctor Strange series, begins in 1974, she's a powerful magician from the Dark Dimension. She's studying with Strange as his disciple and as his girlfriend and wife. During this era, several Marvel characters have spouses, have wives. This is when Mary Jane is Spider-Man's wife. Now, maybe it's, I got married in 82, and that's when Spider-Man and Mary Jane were husband and wife back in then.
Is that true?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay.
And
I knew when you got married. I didn't know the correspondence. Sorry.
I liked it when they had spouses, that the superheroes had a life. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't like the fact that they wiped out the marriage between Mary Jane and Peter Parker, but we're off the subject.
Yeah.
Clea eventually leaves Doctor Strange, says that he needs the love of an Earth woman.
Okay.
Right.
That's like
it's not me. It's not you. It's me. I mean,
sounds like a jazz album.
You need the love of an Earth woman.
Yeah.
But she also has responsibilities back at the Dark Dimension, and has come into her own with her magical power. So they actually brought Clea back in the most recent Doctor Strange annual, but it's obviously not for long term. But I like Clea as a character. Yeah. Now, some of the differences between the comic books and the movies.
Yes.
Okay. Caecilius,
yeah,
who is the main bad guy in the movie, is a really minor character in the comic books. In that run I was telling you about, where Dormammu is giving power to Mordo in Strange Tales 130 plus, Caecilius is Mordo's flunky. And interestingly, he's not even named then. They don't even refer to him by name. It's just sort of Mordo's assistant, Mordo's cohort. And indeed, he's such a tool of Mordo that Mordo literally at one point sort of possesses him to fight with Doctor Strange instead of Caecilius trying to do it himself. It's not until much later in the 1974 Doctor Strange series, issue 56, where they actually name the character. But you know how Marvel was then into continuity. They say Caecilius, and it says, you saw him in Strange Tales 130,
Yeah.
So it's the same character and he looks the same and everything else. That's a pretty good issue for someone who wants to catch up, because they do sort of do a recap of his origin in that issue. That's a fun issue too. It's just a single shot. Another storyline that I really like in the 1974 series, and I don't remember issue numbers, Doctor Strange wipes out all the vampires in Earth. And there were appearances by Dracula and vampires in other comics. There's a classic X-Men annual where Dracula sort of is getting stormed.
Yeah,
okay?
I remember that. Yeah.
And it was after that Doctor Strange wipes out all the vampires in the Marvel Universe. Later on, to get another bad guy, he had to undo that spell, and vampires have come back in the Marvel Universe. I mean, you know how comics are. Everything changes, but then everything goes back. So another big difference is Wong. In the comics, Wong is a manservant. He's not a magician. He's not a sorcerer. My recollection had been that Wong was sort of there from the beginning, but he wasn't. He didn't show up until, I'm going to say, Strange Tales 140-something, when Ditko has already left. So Wong is not a Ditko creation. He comes in afterwards. Again, parallel to Peter Parker. And he says to Doctor Strange, I hate to bother you, but, I need money to pay the bills. I mean,
Wait, really?
Yeah, oh yeah.
I thought he just lived there.
Wong lives at the Sanctum Sanctorum at 177A Bleecker Street.
But he needs to pay the cable bill and stuff.
Well, it starts off with it starts off with a running tab at the drugstore. Where Doctor Strange goes to buy aspirin, for God's sake. So when Wong first appears, he's sort of like the guy who's going to take care of the mundane stuff. And eventually, a couple issues in, Doctor Strange says, "Oh, I don't want you messing with this," and cast a spell, and there's all this money. I mean,
Okay, yeah. The typical writer way to get you out of paying for stuff.
So, and he says, "Take what you need," but
that doesn't break one of the magic laws or something. What are they called? The laws of. There's no about it in the movie.
Yeah, well, that's.
Oh, okay. There's no
the laws of nature. No,
they don't
that
care
Mordo
about
is upset about. Well, it's interesting that they talk about the implications, the dangers of messing with time in the Marvel universe. There's a whole mechanism of times. There's almost sort of a time mechanics and time travel stories. Like you see it in the X-Men Days of Future Past storyline.
Yeah.
And then eventually Rachel comes back.
Yeah.
They say, well, here's this future, but it's a future. It's not necessarily our future. There's all this multiverse in each different timeline. And then in a recent storyline, the Marvel's Secret Wars, most recent Secret Wars, not the Secret Wars that got the black suit for Spider-Man, all the various multiverses are getting destroyed because time got so screwed up, and they destroy all the Earths, and everything gets put into the Secret Universe, Secret Wars universe, and then of course they put it back and stuff. But anyway, there is a consistent theme that they all mess with time, but it has consequences. In the comics, Kamar-Taj, the Ancient One, does not have, shall we say, a Hogwarts of where he's training all the things. That's obviously the influence of Harry Potter. That's not in the comics at all. In the comics, and I'm as you know, a lawyer, and I will analogize to the growth of law in the United States. In the comics, a mage has an apprentice, like Doctor Strange had Clea for a while, Ancient One had Doctor Strange, but there was no school like there is in the movie. Like in the law, Thomas Jefferson, who was a lawyer, he didn't go to law school. He studied with a prominent lawyer in Williamsburg, William White. But anyway, I think that's his name. But see, none of that bothers me. The slip rings bothers me.
You like the adaptations, just the slip ring part is the only part that really.
Yeah. Now, in the comic book, Kamar-Taj, am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Okay, does exist. It was a place. To the origin of the Ancient One in, I'm going to say around 140, 141 of Strange Tales. And Kamar-Taj is the Ancient One's birth village. And the storyline there is he and a friend learned sorcery, and originally they cast spells to make their village. The crops were good, the steers were plentiful, that sort of thing. But then his cohort got power mad. I mean, hey, what comic books? What can you say? Yeah. And he wanted to have the village be an army, and so he froze the Ancient One into stasis. And they attacked, and of course it all fell apart. The bad guy went into another dimension for extended period of time, and then the Ancient One became the Ancient One. And of course, eventually he comes back for his revenge, and the Ancient One and Doctor Strange have to fight him off. So that's what Kamar-Taj was.
Yeah.
What else we got that's different?
I think you got one, didn't you?
I think.
Did you like Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange?
Yeah, I thought he was really good.
Yeah?
I did like him.
Obviously, we know they're doing Mordo next time.
Well, that's set up by the second after credits thing.
But if you could pick any Doctor Strange story to be made into a movie, which one would it be?
Can't do the death of the Ancient One. They've already done that.
Yeah.
They can't really do Clea coming from the Dark Dimension because they've done the Dark Dimension. Clea wasn't there. Let me think. That I hadn't.
Oh, did I throw you?
You threw me. You threw me. There's an interesting one with Silver Dagger that's early in the 74 run. I think that's when it was, where he attacks Doctor Strange. That would be okay, but I didn't love that the way I love some of the other ones.
Yeah.
There's so many good. Something where you go with infinity, I mean, with Eternity, where he has to go start dealing with some of the real cosmic entities. That would be cool. You know what would be cool is to, I guess I can't do this because the rights thing, but...
Well, ignore the right, which
okay.
In a perfect
scenario...
Where Marvel has all their rights.
Well, I'm assuming Doctor Strange is going to play a role in the Infinity Gauntlet.
Yeah, definitely.
And he did in the comics.
Yeah.
Of course, I'd love to have Adam Warlock.
Your trinity of characters are Doctor Strange, Silver Surfer, and
Adam
Warlock.
Well, I love the cosmic stuff. Some of the cosmic entities you've got. Oh, they mentioned the staff of the Living Tribunal.
Did they? Oh yes, yeah.
Mordo.
Yeah, Mordo. That's the Mordo when they're fighting,
when they're training and such.
Yeah.
The Living Tribunal is one of the cosmic characters. You know what would be an interesting story? The spell casting mechanics in the comics, and they don't really develop this here. And you see Doctor Strange, do it all the times. By the eternal Vishanti, by the multiple moons of Munipur, by the dread Dormammu, is you would invoke these characters from other dimensions, and you basically be pulling their power to do the spells. That's the mechanics of spellcasting in the comics.
How the Ancient One was taking power from the Dark Dimension.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Okay. So there's this one storyline in Doctor Strange, I forget when it was right now, where the Vishanti basically say, okay, you've been using our power for a long time. There's this great big interdimensional war battle coming up, and we need you to help us.
Oh, that's cool.
And Doctor Strange basically says, I don't think so. It says, and won't last long. You'll probably only be gone 100 years or so. This is in the comics.
This was in the 70s run, or where was it?
I'm not sure whether it's then or it's later, but anyway.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's a good callback kind of continuity.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
And Doctor Strange says, I don't think so. And so the Vishanti says, well, then screw you. You can't call on our power anymore. And all of a sudden, Doctor Strange, his power is very much diminished. So, there's also a great storyline where Doctor Strange has to go visit one of the great powers, and I'm forgetting which one it was, but he manifests himself as the smoking caterpillar from Alice in Wonderland.
I've heard about this, yeah.
And that was a cool one. But, there's so many good stories in Doctor Strange. They could even follow up with, except they didn't really destroy Dormammu. I was going to say they could follow it with Umar being head of the Dark Dimension, but that doesn't make sense because Dormammu didn't attack Eternity and get destroyed.
Is there a certain Mordo story you think they definitely do for the second one? Or what would be at the top of your...
The best Mordo story was the one I described already, I think. The one which was Ditko and Dormammu and 130 to 141 of Strange Tales.
Yeah.
And then he keeps popping up and stuff. That's be interesting. They could have Doctor Strange defeat Mordo in episode 2, which would be consistent with the early Strange Tales, and then have him come back for episode 3 or 4, I don't know how many they can do, where Mordo is supported by Dormammu. That would be interesting. That would be interesting. Interesting thing.
Okay.
Kaecilius, who I already said is not a major character in the comics. They did do some prelude comics that are Marvel Cinema Universe continuity rather than Marvel Comics continuity, and gives a background on Kaecilius, which was that Doctor Strange came to Ancient One trying to get his hands healed. And they sort of make some vague references to it in the movie, but Kaecilius' wife and child died, and he really came to the Ancient One to try to find some way to bring his family back. The whole thing with, no death, the Book of Cagliostro dealt with time. Part of Kaecilius' frustration is the Ancient One wouldn't do anything to help him get his wife and child back.
They slightly mentioned, Mordo mentions it in that fight, but I think that's the only time.
They just published a graphic novel which contains a couple of things, and it has the 2 published prelude books, and then the one that really deals with Kaecilius' background was what they call an infinite comic. It was only available online until this was published. And then this thing has some other stories in there, including the origin from 115 of Strange Tales is in there. Very brief, but you can see that it in many ways is very consistent. Of course, it's interesting. Through the comics, they keep referring to the home of the Ancient One as being in Tibet, but the first time there's a reference to 115, Doctor Strange is seeking out the Ancient One. He finds him in India.
Oh,
interesting. I just think that's an inconsistency. That's not,
In terms of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where would you rate Doctor Strange? Or rank Doctor Strange?
I mean, I'm not going to give a 1, 2, 3, but I'd put it up with some of my favorite Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, with the second and third Captain America, the Avengers, both Avengers thing, and Iron Man 1. I'd put it right up there with that group.
Yeah.
To me, those are the best ones.
Yeah. Do you remember the song I made about Doctor Strange?
Did you make it or did I make it?
I wrote it.
You wrote it?
I wrote it. Well, I think I did.
Okay.
Who knows? It was so long ago.
This when you were a little kid.
Yeah.
And you were into comics big time.
Yeah.
Okay. Just so everyone knows, I had read comics like in college and into law school and such, and I sort of figured, okay, I'm practicing law. I'm going to leave childish things behind. And then we had you.
Yeah, your actual children.
My actual child.
Yeah.
And you wanted me to take you to a comic book store and buy you a Spider-Man or a couple Spider-Man comics.
Yeah.
And we went into a comic book store, and the first 2 issues of Infinity Gauntlet were out.
Oh, I remember this. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I looked at it, the cover, and it has virtually the whole gamut of Marvel comics. And I sort of flipped through it, and it has Thanos, who was always a favorite villain, and has Adam Warlock, as you call it, my trilogy. Yeah. Adam Warlock and Silver Surfer and Doctor Strange. And so I picked that up, and you got me back addicted to comics, and I've been reading them ever since. And it's your fault.
Yeah, it's my fault. It's my fault. When I was 7. But so the song, you're better at singing.
I'm better at singing. Doctor Strange, he is strange. He's got magic in him. And that's as far as we wrote.
No, it wasn't a full song. It was all right, cool. Thanks, Dad.
Okay.